A murder is going to happen tonight, and I'll be the one to do it. The vampire sat on her bike, parked on the peak of a hill that looked down into a large warehouse. A thick layer of fog formed over Virginia, blanketing the city in a coat of white. It was through this fog that Vicky could barely make out the form of a building. Although it was well past midnight, she saw the many cars in the parking lot. Thin streams of light seeped out of the edges that formed around steel rolling doors, an indicator that there was someone or someone's inside. She was there to kill one man and one man only, Mitch. This man was the father of her best friend, and this man was the man who was about to hurt her best friend. The thought caused the beast to stir, and Vicky was tempted to let it go. "I can't," she snarled. "It could hurt Violet," she reminded herself. Vicky was a young vampire, a bruja, and she'd been blessed that her beast had yet to run wild. The thought was always there in the back of her mind, but she knew better. Letting the beast have its way would result in not only the death of innocence, but her own if she were caught. Something about the masquerade and all that. Vicky didn't much care for politics, and even less for vampire politics, whatever that entailed. Seemed to be just another thing to control her with, but she intended to play by their rules, for now. That wasn't what brought her to this moment. No, it was all Mitch, Violet's father, the father of her best friend. He was supposed to protect her, to guide her, to be the building blocks of life, but he'd thrown all that away for a bit of coin to fill his pockets. Vicky almost let out a cynical laugh as she recalled looking up Mitch on their city's local website. He was a good man, a religious man, and a man who'd never lay a hand on his family, or so they claimed. If only they knew the truth, knew what his intent was on this very night. No, he planned to sell his own flesh and blood, and unknowingly to a vampire. That last part was what made Vicky nervous. If Violet hadn't taken her suggestion, then there was a chance that none of them would be walking out alive. It all came from one phone call. Was it stupid to keep a deceased person's line active? Certainly, especially if that deceased person was actually alive and roaming the streets of Virginia. If her fellow kindred got word, Vicky knew it'd be her head, but she wasn't stupid enough to answer any of the phone calls that came through. Mostly it was spam, bot calls, but every once in a while a call came from her family. It warmed her heart every time the screen flashed with Jackie's name. He was her little bro, and he was the only one to call and leave voicemails, ones that Vicky saved and would listen to whenever she had a bad day, which was often. To be honest, his voice was the only thing that got her out of bed every night, and it was through this that she still felt connected with her humanity. It was a coping mechanism for him as much as it was for her. So, Vicky was surprised when it wasn't Jackie's name that showed up on her screen. No, it was Violet's. Violet hadn't tried to call her since her death. She probably thought the line was cut long ago, and Vicky wasn't sure what came over her. Perhaps it was curiosity, the sudden need to hear her best friend's voice, or the want to end her life by breaching the masquerade, but she answered. On the other end, Violet's voice was frantic, screaming about her insane father. She'd overheard him talking to another person over the phone, details about an exchange, the exchange having to do with Violet herself. It was almost hard to make out the details, but she was able to get the address where it was going to take place. It took a while for Vicky to speak, and when she did, she only warned Violet to run away. But she knew she'd be there the night the exchange was going to happen. There was no way Violet was getting sold, not to anyone. Packed with very little information, Vicky used what she had, and through her connections discovered that there was a local vampire that took an interest in humans, Marcel. He'd bought a few within the last year or two. What he did with them no one knew, and that thought only made Vicky more anxious. She could lose Violet and not have any idea where she went. It pissed her off to know that Mitch would sell his daughter to some stranger who could kill her, or worse, turn her into a monster. Now, Vicky stalked the warehouse in hopes of finding any signs that Mitch was there, and more importantly, that Violet had escaped. Vicky didn't have the knowledge or strength of a vampire who'd been alive for years, and with her luck, maybe even a century. She only hoped to intercept Violet before they ran into Marcel, but Vicky knew that her chances were slim. Her mind worked through every possible scenario. Most of them ended with her head detached, but if Violet made it out, that was all that mattered. Still, none of that would happen if she didn't make it past her first obstacle, getting inside the damn place. I'm finally done. Thanks for listening to the first chapter of my solo game that I'm playing using, or I guess in Vampire the Masquerade. I obviously, if you couldn't tell by my voice, I was extremely nervous. Hopefully I'll get used to kind of like speaking in this way without sounding like complete trash. I guess fun experience, and I'm really excited to like finally flesh out my characters. Currently only one, obviously, but hopefully I can introduce my other Vampire the Masquerade character, who was created specifically for Blood Hunt, which I never really got too much into, but Vicky was made for Bloodlines, and I love her, and she went through so many edits before this rendition, so I'm glad to finally finalize her and like create her story that's not just Bloodlines. Again, this was based, or this isn't based, this is my solo game that I just edited up and made it sound more nicer. And all the resources that I used for the solo game and the Vampire the Masquerade, and just any resources I used to create this, will be linked below. So feel free to check it out. And thanks for watching, and I hope everyone has an amazing day and stay safe.